Billy Ray's vase, right? I own this vase, and I can play like Harlem Globetrotter shit with it in, right? Okay, you want Mellow Lemon shit, right? Hey, man, I'm sorry about that.
Perfectly all right, William. It was your vase.
That's a cheap vase, man. That was a fake, right?
I think we paid $35,000 for it. But I seem to remember we estimated its value at $50,000 for the insurance company. You see, Mortimer, William has already made us a profit of $15,000.
You want me to break something else?
No. Pay up, Mortimer. I've won the bet.
Here, $1.
We took a perfectly useless psychopath like Valentine and turned him into a successful executive. And during the same time, we turned an honest, hard-working man into a violently deranged would-be killer. Now, what are we going to do about taking Winthrop back and returning Valentine to the ghetto?
I don't want Winthrop back after what he's done.
You mean keep Valentine on as managing director?
Do you really believe I would have a nigger run our family business, Randolph?
Of course not. Neither would I. I do think we should hold off on switching them back, though, until we get that crop report New Year's Eve, don't you?
Absolutely. No sense rocking the boat until then.
If Mr. Beeks does what we paid him to do, we should have a very happy New Year.
Indeed.
Race, realism, eugenics, nature versus nurture as regards to race was already like debunked when I was a kid, man. Like the for example, you know, in pop culture, the film Trading Places was sort of one big gag about the ignorance, the backwardness of these two old money bigots who sort of need to do this experiment to reconcile the idea that black people are not, you know, I had mentioned online that this idea of good breeding is like a Victorian, monarchist, sort of aristocratic concept that had been put to bed, I would say, at towards the beginning of the 20th century, man. I mean, even before that, the idea of good breeding, you know, in the Old West would have been, at least for white people, would have been already long debunked. And by the fucking end of the First or Second World War, certainly the idea that somehow black people were born with extremely low IQs or something, were incapable of, you know, achieving basic social equality. That was already put to bed. You know, the armed forces were integrated during right after the, I think it was towards the second half of the Second World War, that they integrated the military. When Trading Places was made, in the early 80s, a long time ago, at this point, it wasn't a mainstream position that somehow we needed more data. Right now in 2018, when you ask certain members of the skeptic community, the most empirically, supposedly an empiricism based movement, even like beyond YouTube, you got people like Steve Pinker talking about black crime statistics. He's a professor, a Canadian professor, who is ostensibly a Jewish race realist. It's just that he's not an anti-Semite, but he believes that black people are low-born, inherently unethical mongrels. Eugenics has a long, disgusting tradition in the West. It's deeply connected to the sort of like human beings are livestock. It's very, very conjectural, and to see it represented to the public in the way that it is now. In the post-internet age is shocking and disorienting to me, and so kind of bad faith. It's this kind of twin speak that occurs in cults, where you hear somebody in a cult talk about certain issues, like Scientologists have certain language for the villains and the narratives inside their cult. Evangelical Christians have certain kind of language for the grand narratives of their cult. And the alt-right is the same. If you really dig into the eugenics argument, it is a grand narrative, a seeded narrative about a group of people, the worth of a group of people, framed as a question. Eugenics is always framed as a question. The Jewish question, the IQ question has now reappeared in the public discourse, but it's always suppositional, so that it can mainstream itself by getting the benefit of the doubt. This idea of you don't have to believe my disgusting ideas about genetic inferiority. You just need to be open to having the conversation. But Trading Places is a great mainstream piece of pop culture that a long time ago. Not that Trading Places is it's fiction, so it's not like the scientific community refers to Trading Places in order to debunk race realism, but long before the human genome was cracked, and long before the bell curve, and before before there were all these stats that the modern eugenics movement and the alt-right twists and exploits and lies through omission with existed, people knew that white and black people, again, not everybody, but it's been a mainstream position in America for probably more than 40 years, since the end of Jim Crow, that there's no genetic component to who becomes a banker, who becomes a baker, who becomes a criminal. You'll often hear on the alt-right this kind of old segregationist talking about, oh, that's very white of you. This is a very white thing to do. This is a very Germanic thing to do. This is a very Aryan thing to do. There are no components of human behavior that are race specific, and then they'll and they'll cite arguments about, oh well, black people, sickle cell anemia, and all that stuff. I'm like, no, that doesn't mean that because there's some kind of heritability of sickle cell anemia in the black community, or like a predisposition for certain medical conditions, does not mean that like they have ground for this, again, Victorian Calvinist argument about black people are born as shoplifters, or somehow that you bring up Neil deGrasse Tyson to these fucking people even, and they just kind of, oh, that's just one, that's just the existence of black academics is like statistical noise to people like this. And you'll see that even after the Dukes have their conclusion from the little research experiment, the dollar bet, you will see them still after seeing with their own eyes that Billy Ray Valentine, played by Eddie Murphy, is up to the task, that he just needed the opportunity, because there is a pro-affirmative action message inside of Trading Places as well. It's a film that advocates for equality of opportunity, and after they get their conclusion, they still slur and disparage Billy Ray. They don't want to let him keep the position of authority and expertise that he's earned and worked for, just because. And to me, looking at this kind of argument from the outside, whether it's about Jewish people, whether it's about now they say it about Muslim and Central and South American immigrants, that those people are born communists, that somehow they're genetically socialists, they vote Democrat because they're genetically incapable of capitalism, blah blah blah, and especially in the United States of America, with its history of physically enslaving African Americans for hundreds of years and then segregating after that. Inside those people's heart is this deep cynicism of, even if you presented these motherfuckers indisputable, conclusive, scientific evidence of our position, right, the egalitarian position, they can't believe it because it's an assumption, the assumption of white genetic supremacy, inherent white civility is not based on anything but what they already think about a group of people.